In the closing months of World War II, as Allied forces pressed toward victory in the Pacific, one American warship would become the center of a tragedy so profound it would forever alter naval protocols and haunt the memories of those few who survived it. This is the story of the USS Indianapolis. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters, where we cover some of the most devastating events that happened throughout history. The heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis, a Portland-class vessel commissioned in 1932, had just completed what would later be revealed as one of the most consequential missions of the war. Under the command of Captain Charles Butler McVay III, the ship had delivered the components of Little Boy to the island of Tinian in the western Pacific. The atomic bombs Little Boy and Fat Man would soon after be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. With its classified cargo safely delivered, the Indianapolis received new orders: proceed to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines to join training exercises for the anticipated invasion of Japan. What no one could know was that this proud ship, which had served with distinction throughout the Pacific campaign, would never reach its destination. The Indianapolis departed from Guam on July 28, 1945. Despite being in waters known to harbor Japanese submarines, the ship traveled unescorted, a decision that would later face intense scrutiny. Naval intelligence had recently reported enemy submarine activity in the area, but this information never reached Captain McVay. Meanwhile, Japanese submarine I-58, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, was patrolling these same waters. On the night of July 30th, shortly after midnight, Hashimoto's lookout spotted a large vessel on the horizon. The conditions were ideal for an attack. The Indianapolis was maintaining a steady course and speed, and the night sky was partially obscured, providing just enough visibility without revealing the lurking submarine. At 12:14 a.m., Hashimoto gave the order to fire 6 torpedoes. 2 found their mark, striking the Indianapolis with devastating precision. The first hit near the bow, blowing away a large section of the ship. The second struck amid, igniting fuel tanks and powder magazines. The damage was catastrophic and immediate. The ship lost all electrical power. No distress signal could be sent. The Indianapolis began listing heavily to starboard. Water rushed in through massive gashes in her hull. Within 12 minutes, barely enough time for many sleeping crew members to understand what was happening, the USS Indianapolis rolled completely over and plunged bow first into the Philippine Sea. Of the 1,195 men aboard, approximately 300 went down with the ship. The remaining 900 men found themselves adrift in the open ocean. What followed was one of the most harrowing survival ordeals in naval history. Most of the men had been forced to abandon ship without life jackets. Those who managed to reach life rafts discovered there were far too few. Many clung to floating debris known as flotsam or treaded water in makeshift groups. They had no food, little drinking water, and many were severely injured from the explosions or burns from oil fires that had erupted across the ship's deck. Their suffering had only begun. The men were spread across miles of open ocean in several large groups. Exposure to the elements quickly became a deadly factor. Scorching sun and heat during the day led to severe dehydration, while cold nights brought hypothermia. Some men, delirious from drinking seawater, would swim away from their groups, never to return. Then came what survivors would later describe as the most terrifying aspect of their ordeal: the sharks. Drawn by blood in the water from wounded sailors, oceanic whitetips and tiger sharks began circling the men. The attack started the first day and continued relentlessly. Often, a sailor would suddenly scream and be pulled under, never to resurface. Sometimes men would simply disappear silently beneath the waves. The men tried various tactics to survive, forming tight circles, kicking at approaching sharks, trying to stay as still as possible to avoid attracting attention. But as hours turned into days, exhaustion made these defenses increasingly difficult to maintain. Meanwhile, at naval bases across the Pacific, no alarms were raised about the missing Indianapolis. Due to a series of communication errors and procedural failures, the ship's non-arrival at Leyte Gulf went unreported. The men of the Indianapolis were, in the cruelest terms, lost in bureaucracy while they fought for their lives in the open sea. 4 days after the sinking, on August 2nd, a routine patrol flight changed everything. Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn, piloting a PV-1 Ventura bomber, spotted an oil slick while flying over the Philippine Sea. Banking his aircraft for a closer look, he was shocked to discover men scattered across the water's surface. Gwynn immediately radioed for help and began circling the area. Another pilot, Lieutenant Adrian Marks, responded to the call and took extraordinary action. Flying a PBY Catalina seaplane, Marks made the decision to attempt a dangerous open-sea landing to begin rescuing survivors immediately. Despite damaging his aircraft in the landing, Marks and his crew began pulling men from the water, ultimately saving 56 sailors from the endless sea and the circling sharks. The first surface vessel to arrive was a USS Cecil J. Doyle, commanded by Lieutenant Commander W. Graham Clayton Jr., who made the bold decision to illuminate his destroyer as a beacon of hope in the darkness, risking Japanese attack to guide other rescue ships to the scene. By the time the rescue operation concluded, only 316 men of the original 1,195 had survived. The rest had succumbed to drowning, exposure, dehydration, salt poisoning, or shark attacks. It remains the single greatest loss of life at sea from a single ship in U.S. naval history. The aftermath of the Indianapolis tragedy brought another kind of assault, this time on Captain McVeigh. In December 1945, in a highly controversial decision, the Navy court-martialed McVeigh for hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. Although testimony from Commander Hashimoto himself that zigzagging would have made no difference in the attack. McVeigh was found guilty, the only U.S. Navy captain court-martialed for losing his ship in combat during the war. Though his sentence was remitted and he continued serving until retiring in 1949, the conviction remained on his record. For years after, McVeigh received hate mail from families of the dead. Some contained copies of their loved one's photograph, others sent bullets suggesting he used them on himself. On November 6, 1968, haunted by the tragedy and its aftermath, Charles McVeigh took his own life using his service revolver. He was found clutching a toy sailor given to him by his father. It would take decades before justice would come. The survivors of the Indianapolis formed an association that campaigned tirelessly for their captain's exoneration. In the year 2000, following testimony from many survivors, Congress passed a resolution expressing that McVeigh's record should reflect that he is exonerated for the loss of the USS Indianapolis. In 2001, Secretary of the Navy Gordon England formally exonerated McVeigh. The story of the Indianapolis exposed critical flaws in Navy protocols. The disaster led to the implementation of the Movement Report System, ensuring that all ships would be tracked continuously. It also resulted in changes to abandonment procedures and improved rescue equipment and techniques. For decades, the final resting place of the Indianapolis remained unknown, one of the many silent tombs on the ocean floor. But in August 2017, a search expedition led by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen located the wreckage more than 18,000 feet below the surface of the Philippine Sea. The discovery brought a measure of closure to the dwindling number of survivors and the families of those lost. Today, the USS Indianapolis Memorial stands on the Canal Walk in Indianapolis, Indiana. Each year, fewer survivors attend their reunions as time claims those who outlived the sea's fury. Their story, one of incredible endurance, unspeakable suffering, institutional failure, and ultimate resilience, continues to educate and inspire. The legacy of the Indianapolis serves as a stark reminder of war's terrible cost and the extraordinary capacity of human beings to endure. It stands as a testament to those who were lost and those who survived against impossible odds. In naval history, few stories capture such profound tragedy and triumph of the human spirit as that of the USS Indianapolis and her crew. Thanks for watching today's video on this devastating but important historical event. If you found this informative, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. And let me know in the comments what other overlooked historical events you'd like to learn about. Until next time, this has been Deadliest Disasters.